Hello everyone and welcome to our very first lesson about Tutela, and we're going to start from the basics. The very first lesson being, what is Tutela? So Tutela, the name comes from an ancient Roman concept of guardianship. Um, and literally from the name guardian, we conceived this as a system where you are allowed to see everything to do about your organization's security posture, okay? Um, and this came about because most organizations have a number of important questions that are common to all these customers that we speak to. And these would be basically one of the following. What assets are running in my infrastructure, right? So um, obviously as a corollary of that, it is what software is installed on my workstations and servers. All this is done because we want to know what vulnerabilities and threats apply to us, right? Or what security best practices can I apply to these assets that I just detected. And as all of you know, there's been a humongous push towards the cloud. I wouldn't say all of our customers are 100% in the cloud, but some of them are. So an extension to all the above is basically asking these questions, however, within a cloud environment. So we need to support that as well. So the main features of Tutela are features that help you answer those questions. So we detect assets across your networks. We detect a software that is installed on your hosts. We go even deeper than that. We're seeing a shift left towards secure development. So we detect libraries that are used in your development projects. Once we know what is running in your infrastructure, we can detect vulnerabilities that apply to you, right? Whether they are on network, so network scans, host scans, or in your development pipeline. So apart from these CVEs, these vulnerabilities, right, which are normally just resolved by patching, we take things a step further and we go with compliance alerts. Now, compliance alerts are alerts which help you keep track of which security best practices you applied in your hosts and which ones are still missing. They provide you like a roadmap of things that you can do depending on what's being scanned. If it's Windows or Linux or something else, it will give you what we call compliance alerts. And it's called compliance alerts rather than best practices because it helps you to comply with certain frameworks. The one that we check against is a Department of Defense or NIST one, which maps to a variety of other frameworks. Obviously, we support cloud provider scanning, Azure and AWS at the time of this recording. And not part of this course, but we also do online presence monitoring, which means scanning for potential phishing sites, data leaks, dark web scans, things like that. Right. In order to do everything we just mentioned, we cannot rely, or Tutela does not rely on a single method, right? So unlike some others out there, we don't just tell you install this agent and you're done. We have three approaches. Each one has its own advantages and disadvantages, which we are going to explore. But in a nutshell, we have network scans, and a network scan is where you have an agent that doesn't need to be installed everywhere. So that's the advantage there, right? You just install it once, and it scans your network for any IPs that respond back and then does a traditional port scan, vulnerability detection, things like that. Obviously, that is not enough for, let's say, more mature deployments. So you would want to monitor your hosts themselves, in which case you have to install an agent on every host. The upside of that is that it gives you a list of all the software that is running and lets you see these best practices that we were talking about before. Neither of these two approaches work when it comes to cloud providers because Amazon have their own API set and Azure have their own API set, so we also do cloud provider scans. As a summary, this is the high-level architecture of Tutela. So In general, unless otherwise noted, the Tutela server is installed on the CyberSoft cloud infrastructure that we control, and the customer, or you guys, the administrators, you don't need to do anything. Along with that, we also have basically a network scanner, the same thing that you guys would be running, an external network scanner that you can tell us so that it would scan your external network. In other words, what IP addresses are responding, what public IP addresses, right, are responding, what ports are open over there, that kind of thing. However, if you want to do the same thing, but instead of an external network, you want to scan your internal network, that is where the internal network scanner comes in, right? It communicates with with the main server, which IP addresses do I need to scan, and then sends the results back. It's important to note that these scanners, whether they are the network scanners, whether they are the host agents, their job is not actually to find vulnerabilities. Their job is actually to enumerate assets, to enumerate software that is running, to enumerate ports that are responding, and then send all that information back to the server. And it's the server that does the heavy lifting, right? It goes and checks with our vulnerability database. It goes and checks with our frameworks that we have, if a certain vulnerability applies to you, if a certain best practice applies to that, which means that these agents are typically very, very lightweight and don't consume a lot of resources. So these agents are installed anywhere, either as a network scanner or they are installed on each individual workstation and server, and they always report back to the main server so that Tutela admins can see the assets that have been discovered, software, so on and so forth. Our external network scanner and the server is in charge of calling the cloud vendor APIs to do their checks. Whether it's AWS or Azure, it is our cloud that does that. It's not the customer. Obviously, the customer needs to give us permission. And the last bit has to do with the online presence monitor, which is that we scan the web and the dark web as well for potential phishing sites and data leaks. Very last slide, what Tutela is not. So just to make sure that there are there's clarity across the board about what it can do and what it can't do. So what it does not allow you to do is Tutela agent will not replace an antivirus, endpoint detection and response system, or a SIEM agent, though this is debatable. However, the first two definitely you do need an antivirus, your Windows Defender, your whatever it is, and even better than an antivirus, you probably need an EDR agent like CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, whatever you need. Due to security reasons, a lot of customers ask us this, maybe unlike some other bigger vendors out there like Sophos, we do not allow you to run commands remotely, so there's no remote shell functionality within the agents that you install. At the moment, we do not apply any missing patches that we detect. So this is on the roadmap. However, at the moment, while we do detect the missing patches, they're not applied. So you do still need something like Intune or Manage Engine, but that should change in the near future. We don't perform automated web vulnerability analysis scans. So you're like your Aconetics or Burp Suite, that kind of stuff. We don't do it right now. And last but not least, we don't yet support Mac OS, MacBooks, and smartphones. So that's about it. We're going to, in our next video, we'll probably have a walkthrough through the UI before, and then delving throughout each and every method that we just described in this video. Thank you very much for listening.